One actor had his face rebuilt every morning for this movie, and during one scene, a kiss literally ripped his fake nose off. Another set survived a real hurricane after filming wrapped, and one country actually got a different version of the movie entirely. These are 20 weird facts about Looper, and somehow the real story behind this film is even stranger than the movie itself. Fact number 1. The kiss that ripped off his face. One of the strangest moments during production happened while filming the romantic scene between Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Emily Blunt. By that point, Gordon-Levitt was already wearing layers of delicate prosthetic makeup designed to make him resemble a younger Bruce Willis. The makeup team had attached fake lips, reshaped his nose, altered his ears, and blended everything together so it could survive long shooting days. But during one take, the kiss between the actors became so intense that Gordon-Levitt's prosthetic nose partially peeled off in the middle of filming. According to behind-the-scenes stories, the makeup department kept asking the actors to be gentler so the appliances wouldn't break apart. At the exact same time, director Rian Johnson wanted the scene to feel more emotional and realistic, so the actors were getting completely opposite instructions from different sides of the set. It became one of the weirdest balancing acts in the entire production. The filmmakers wanted raw performances, but the practical makeup effects were fragile enough that even a kiss could ruin hours of work. And somehow, none of that chaos is noticeable in the final scene. Fact number 2. The 3-hour face transformation. Making Joseph Gordon-Levitt believable as a younger Bruce Willis was one of the biggest risks in Looper. If audiences didn't buy that both actors were the same person, the entire movie would fall apart emotionally. To pull it off, legendary makeup artist Kazuhiro Tsuji spent nearly 3 hours every morning transforming Gordon-Levitt with prosthetics. His nose was reshaped, his lips were altered, his ears were adjusted, and thick blue contact lenses changed his eye color to match Willis more closely. Ironically, the contacts became the hardest part of the process. Gordon-Levitt later admitted they constantly irritated his eyes and made filming uncomfortable because they were so thick. But the transformation went beyond makeup. Gordon-Levitt studied Bruce Willis carefully, copying his voice, posture, facial expressions, and speech patterns. Willis even recorded dialogue so Gordon-Levitt could practice sounding exactly like him. Eventually, all that work paid off. During production, Willis reportedly told Gordon-Levitt, "Man, you sound like me." For Gordon-Levitt, that was the moment he realized the performance was finally working. Fact number 3. The movie's budget problem became part of the script. Early versions of Looper originally had Joe escaping to Paris in the future, which is why the film keeps showing him learning French during the opening scenes. But there was a problem. The production couldn't actually afford to shoot in Paris. Then Chinese company DMG Entertainment became involved and offered financing that allowed filming in Shanghai instead. Rather than hiding the change, Rian Johnson rewrote the story around it completely. That's why Jeff Daniels' character suddenly tells Joe that France is overrated and insists he should move to China instead. The movie was basically referencing its own production rewrite in real time. Ironically, the limitation may have improved the film. Johnson later admitted Shanghai looked far more futuristic than Paris ever could. The neon skyline and dense architecture gave Looper a believable sci-fi atmosphere without relying heavily on expensive visual effects. It's one of the best examples of what made Looper work so well behind the scenes. Some of the movie's smartest creative choices came directly from budget limitations the filmmakers were forced to solve. Fact number 4. Joseph Gordon-Levitt secretly spoke better French than his character. One of the funniest casting coincidences in Looper is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt actually speaks French fluently in real life. Throughout the movie, his character struggles through awkward language lessons while trying to prepare for life in Paris. But off-camera, Gordon-Levitt already knew the language extremely well. That irony became even funnier after the production changed Joe's future destination from Paris to Shanghai. Suddenly, all those scenes about learning French remained in the script, even though the character would never actually end up living in France anymore. Rian Johnson decided to keep the scenes because they still helped establish Joe's dream of escaping his violent life. Even though the Paris storyline disappeared, the French lessons remained as a leftover piece of the movie's earlier version. Most viewers never realize they're watching traces of an entirely different script hidden inside the final film. Fact number 5. The fake diner fooled an entire town. The diner featured throughout Looper wasn't a real restaurant. The production built it specifically for filming in Thibodaux, Louisiana. But once the set was finished, locals began stopping by constantly because they thought an actual diner was opening in town. People reportedly asked crew members when the restaurant would officially begin serving customers. From the outside, the building looked completely authentic. What makes the story even stranger is what happened after filming ended. In 2012, Hurricane Isaac hit parts of Louisiana with heavy winds and flooding. Despite being nothing more than a temporary movie set, the fake diner reportedly survived the storm almost completely intact. A building created to exist for only a short period somehow outlasted a real hurricane. And for many locals, the diner became one of the most memorable things left behind from the production. Fact number 6. Bruce Willis trained his younger self. The makeup alone wasn't enough to sell the illusion that Joseph Gordon-Levitt would eventually become Bruce Willis. Rian Johnson knew the performance itself had to match too. To prepare, Gordon-Levitt studied Willis obsessively. He copied the way he spoke, the rhythm of his voice, and even subtle facial expressions during conversations. Bruce Willis reportedly helped by recording dialogue for Gordon-Levitt to practice against between shoots. The goal wasn't to create a perfect impression. Johnson wanted audiences to subconsciously believe they were watching the same person at different ages. Eventually, the work started paying off. Willis later told Gordon-Levitt that he genuinely sounded like him during certain scenes. Gordon-Levitt admitted hearing that completely validated the months of preparation he had put into the role. Even today, the performance remains one of the most debated parts of Looper. Some viewers completely buy the transformation, while others still find it uncanny. But either way, people still talk about it more than a decade later. Fact number 7. The gunspin fail stayed in the movie. Noah Segan's character, Kid Blue, carries one of the strangest weapons in the entire movie. The oversized blunderbuss-style gun was already awkward enough to handle, but Segan also trained to spin it dramatically between takes to make the character feel cocky and unpredictable. During filming, he performed the spin successfully multiple times, but in one take, he almost completely lost control of the weapon and nearly dropped it. Most directors would have immediately cut the mistake. Instead, Rian Johnson thought the fumble actually fit the character perfectly. Kid Blue was supposed to feel reckless and overly confident, so the near disaster made him seem more believable. Johnson kept the failed spin in the final movie intentionally. It became one of those accidental little moments that added personality to the film without most audiences ever realizing it was unplanned. Fact number 8. Emily Blunt said yes before reading the script. Emily Blunt committed to Looper surprisingly early in development. According to interviews, she had barely read part of the screenplay before agreeing to join the movie. At the time, she reportedly didn't even know which role she would end up playing. She simply trusted Rian Johnson's writing and liked the overall concept enough to sign on immediately. That level of confidence turned out to be important because Sarah eventually became one of the emotional anchors of the film. In a movie filled with time travel, assassins, and futuristic violence, her scenes provide most of the human tension that keeps the story grounded. Blunt's performance also helped balance the colder atmosphere of the movie. Without her character, Looper could have felt much more mechanical and emotionally distant. Fact number 9. The idea sat in Rian Johnson's head for 10 years. Even though Looper released in 2012, Rian Johnson had been developing ideas for the story since around 2002, years before most audiences even knew who he was. At the time, Johnson was still trying to launch his directing career after writing Brick. The basic concept of hitmen killing targets sent back through time fascinated him, but the story kept evolving for nearly a decade before it finally became a finished screenplay. That long development process may actually explain why the movie feels so tightly constructed compared to many other time travel films. Johnson had years to refine the rules, simplify the world, and focus more on character decisions instead of overwhelming science fiction explanations. Ironically, Johnson has even admitted he intentionally avoided over-explaining the time travel logic because he felt audiences would get lost in endless details. Instead, the movie focuses on emotion and consequences rather than trying to perfectly solve every paradox. And honestly, that decision is probably one of the main reasons Looper still holds up today. Fact number 10. Bruce Willis almost wasn't in the movie. Casting Bruce Willis was one of the most important decisions in the entire production. If audiences didn't believe he and Joseph Gordon-Levitt were the same person, the emotional core of Looper would completely collapse. Rian Johnson later admitted he was nervous about whether Willis would fully commit to the concept. The role required him to match Gordon-Levitt's performance style instead of simply playing another version of his classic action hero persona. Fortunately, Willis leaned into the idea almost immediately. Rather than ignoring Gordon-Levitt's preparation, he worked with it, helping create the illusion that both versions of Joe shared the same habits and personality. That collaboration ended up becoming one of the biggest reasons the movie worked at all. Fact number 11. The future was designed to look broken. Unlike most sci-fi movies, Looper intentionally avoided making the future look sleek or advanced. Rian Johnson wanted the world to feel worn down, patched together, and barely functioning. Cars looked old and modified instead of futuristic. Technology felt cheap and unreliable. Buildings looked dirty and recycled rather than polished and modern. Johnson believed audiences would connect more with a future that looked believable instead of perfect. Rather than creating giant CGI cities everywhere, the production focused on subtle details that suggested society was slowly falling apart. That grounded visual style became one of the movie's biggest strengths. Even though Looper takes place decades in the future, the world still feels strangely realistic. Fact number 12. The score was a family collaboration. The music for Looper was composed by Nathan Johnson, who happens to be Rian Johnson's cousin. The two had already worked together on earlier films, and their collaborations eventually became a recurring part of Rian Johnson's career. Nathan's soundtrack played a huge role in shaping the movie's tense atmosphere. Instead of using a traditional orchestral sci-fi score, the music feels mechanical, gritty, and almost industrial at times. That unusual sound matched the rough future world Johnson wanted audiences to experience. Even the soundtrack feels imperfect and unstable, just like the society shown on screen. The family collaboration behind the movie gave Looper a much more personal creative style than most studio science fiction films. Fact number 13. The gun sounds became part of the music. One of the strangest details in Looper involves the movie's soundtrack. Rian Johnson reportedly used recordings of the actual prop weapons as part of the film's percussion and sound design. Instead of separating the music completely from the environment, Johnson wanted the sounds of the world itself to bleed into the score. Mechanical clicks, weapon noises, and metallic sounds became part of the rhythm audiences hear throughout the movie. It's a subtle detail most viewers never consciously notice, but it helps make the film feel more immersive. The world of Looper almost sounds alive in the background. That attention to tiny audio details is part of why the movie still feels unique compared to other sci-fi films from the same era. Fact number 14. The movie started as a much smaller idea. Before becoming a major studio release starring Bruce Willis, Looper originally existed as a much smaller sci-fi concept in Rian Johnson's mind. Johnson has said the story began more like an indie-style experiment focused on a simple time travel premise rather than a massive action film. Even after expanding the project into a feature, he intentionally kept the storytelling lean and focused. That's why Looper feels very different from most big-budget science fiction movies. Instead of endless exposition and giant action scenes every few minutes, the film spends most of its time focusing on characters and consequences. The result feels almost like a strange mix between an indie drama and a futuristic thriller. And honestly, that unusual combination is probably why the movie developed such a strong cult following after release. Fact number 15. The floating coins were mostly practical. One of the coolest effects in Looper happens during the telekinesis scenes, especially when objects begin floating around Paul Dano's character early in the film. Most audiences assumed those shots were created entirely with CGI, but surprisingly, many of the floating object effects were done practically using wires and physical rigs on set. Rian Johnson wanted the telekinetic moments to feel grounded and believable instead of overly flashy. The production avoided excessive digital effects whenever possible because Johnson thought realistic movement would make the powers feel more disturbing. That decision helped separate Looper from a lot of modern sci-fi movies that rely heavily on obvious CGI spectacle. The telekinesis in Looper feels subtle, dangerous, and strangely realistic because so much of it physically existed during filming. Fact number 16. The power plant was a safety nightmare. The industrial location used for several major scenes in Looper looked dangerous on screen because it actually was. The same power plant used for the furnace body disposal scenes also doubled as the location for the future time machine sequences. According to Rian Johnson, filming there felt like a complete safety nightmare because of the extreme heat, heavy machinery, and hazardous industrial environment surrounding the crew. The location gave the movie an authentic, gritty atmosphere, but it also made production far more difficult than filming on a controlled soundstage. Still, Johnson believed real environments helped make the future world feel believable. And honestly, that rough industrial setting became one of the movie's most memorable visual elements. Fact number 17. FX aired a completely different performance. When Looper aired on FX television, most viewers assumed the network simply censored certain scenes for broadcast. But according to Rian Johnson, one scene involving Piper Perabo was actually replaced with entirely different footage. Instead of just editing around nudity or digitally altering the original scene, the television version reportedly used alternate takes with a completely separate performance filmed specifically for broadcast standards. That means some TV audiences literally watched a different version of the movie without realizing it. It's a bizarre little piece of trivia that perfectly fits a movie already obsessed with alternate timelines and different versions of reality. Fact number 18. Joseph Gordon-Levitt spent his 30th birthday suspended from a building. During filming of the fire escape sequence, Gordon-Levitt spent part of his birthday suspended high above the ground in stunt wires while filming the dangerous-looking fall scene. Between takes, the crew reportedly sang "Happy Birthday" to him while he was still hanging there in the harness. It's one of those weird behind-the-scenes stories that sounds almost too ridiculous to be real, but it also shows how physically demanding the role became, especially with Gordon-Levitt performing many of the film's action-heavy scenes while buried under heavy prosthetic makeup. Fact number 19. One country got a longer version of the movie. Most audiences don't realize that the version of Looper released in China wasn't exactly the same movie shown in American theaters. Because Chinese company DMG Entertainment helped finance the production, several Shanghai scenes existed in longer form for the Chinese release. Some sequences that were shortened or removed in the United States remained intact overseas. So technically, audiences in different countries watched slightly different versions of the film. The change makes even more sense when you realize how important Shanghai became to the movie after the original Paris storyline was abandoned. The city wasn't just a backdrop anymore, it became a major part of the film's identity. Fact number 20. The movie made 6 times its budget. Despite being a strange, complicated sci-fi movie with time travel and multiple versions of the same character, Looper became a massive success. The film was produced for around $30 million and eventually earned roughly $176 million worldwide. That made it one of the most profitable original sci-fi films of the decade. Even more impressive, the movie accomplished that without relying on an existing franchise, superhero characters, or massive blockbuster spectacle. Over time, Looper developed a reputation as one of the smartest science fiction movies of the 2000s, and more than a decade later, audiences are still debating the ending, arguing about the time travel logic and discovering weird behind-the-scenes details that somehow make the movie even stranger. Looper somehow managed to feel like a huge sci-fi blockbuster and a weird little indie film at the exact same time. And honestly, that's probably why people still talk about it today. If you enjoyed the video, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which fact surprised you the most. And if there's another movie you want covered next here on Iconic TV Rewind, drop it below.